there are politicians in this country who think that Israel has done the right thing and is doing the right thing because it's somewhat defending Western values. These are not Western values. I don't want this to be Western values. Western values should be different and should be a combination of who we are and who we don't want to be anymore.
Francesca, you are a UN Special Rapporteur. This is a duty, a call, I don't know how you want to call it, but it's a choice you made at a certain point. But the road towards this is not from one day up until the other day that this happens. What happened
Before?
Like, when was this seed planted?
As I was growing up, I come from a region which has been plagued by criminality, mafia, camorra. For many people outside of Italy, this is a phenomenon. For example, the mafia, it's a phenomenon that is really like, bad thugs, a phenomenon of thugs. But I know as an Italian, as a Southern Italian, that the mafia is a system within the system that thrives thanks to corrupted politicians and financial interests. And two judges were killed as I was growing up.
Really? So you saw injustice up close?
Very, very, very. This is our story. And these two judges were killed, like many others who were trying to call out and to denounce the mafia as a system made of criminals, but white-collar criminals, who use the system and the laws in order to advance and cover up for crimes for their friends. And when these two this is what I've been thinking, but when these two judges were killed, something inside me shifted.
How old were you?
15.
15, teenager.
Teenager.
Young Francesca, and you see this around you.
Yeah.
And something shifted. What shifted? What happened?
I saw what happened after, that the people decided not to be silenced anymore. The people said, if this is us, if it happens to them, no one is protected. It's about us. The only way for them to win is through our silence. And the thing is that people in Sicily have united incredibly. They've been so strong. The anti-mafia movement has been incredibly strong.
With the risk of maybe jeopardizing your own life also.
Yes, many. But this is the thing. When you put the collective good at the center, it's not about who you are as a person. It's the future. You plant seeds for a better future. And now, no doubt, the system, the life of many has become more free. Last year I was in Sicily presenting a book that I wrote in Italian, and the moderator, as an Italian academic, she's Sicilian, she was asking ways for people to relate, for people here to relate to Palestine. I was saying, I don't know. And then as I was giving my answer, she was looking at me and saying, but this is exactly the struggle we have had, because we had tried for years to denounce the system, to expose there was something wrong in the systematic violation of the law, and we had to react by using the law. Okay,
but before you get there, before you understand how the system works...
It's long.
It's long. So, 15 years old, you're impressed by the movement, the civil movement, the way people unite.
This is what I've watched without necessarily making sense of it. No. And then I go to the university, and when I was in university, there was the struggle for Öcalan and the struggle for the Kurdish people and the Tibetan people and the Palestinian people. It was somewhat still, there was the question of self-determination, but not necessarily elaborated upon as it is today. It was just, these people are oppressed, we stand with them.
Right.
It's not even, we don't even need to...
discuss it.
No. They are oppressed, we stand with them. Yeah. This is the movement around me when I was in university. And also, bear in mind that I grew up in a country, like many others in Europe, but Italy in particular. As I was growing up, Palestine was almost a domestic issue, I was talking to the students tonight, as it is Ukraine for them. So the young generation right now doesn't understand necessarily the whole history of Palestine and how it has been perceived in Europe. But as I grew up, there was no question. Italy has always been a friend of the State of Israel, but also recognize the right of the Palestinians to exist as a people in whatever form.
Yeah.
And the state was one of them. But if it's not the state, it is to be full recognition of civil and political, economic, social and cultural rights.
I like what you describe about the function of an institute, like a university. This is a place where you can discuss these kind of matters, where you can also express your solidarity, maybe. At the same time, when we look at the Netherlands and the protests at universities, which have been suppressed at a certain moment and criminalized. Are we losing the function of our institutes?
We have already lost it if we are there. Because, there are different things. First of all, universities should be a really safe space for dialogue. We don't have to agree, Natasja. It's okay. We can bring different ideas, different arguments, and this is how we grow as a society, right? Dialogue is the bridge between our islands of divergence. Okay, that's fine.
And this is what we learn at university. We used to learn.
Yeah, and the thing is that also universities should preserve, so there are limits, of course, to how much you can say. Hatred should be prohibited, incitement to violence should be prohibited. But then, this has been invoked as a way to silence others, to the point that the revindication of rights for other people has been used as something like incitement to violence. And this is where I think we have lost it. If we are at this point, and then I've heard arguments, including in this country, but universities need to stay neutral. Guys, no. Neutrality is a very technical concept, and it doesn't belong to universities. Neutrality is like, to be very brutal, zipping your mouth and trying to take not to express your opinion is what you do in a humanitarian operation, where you need to preserve your functions and your services while parties are conflicting, and then you need to deliver humanitarian aid or health. A university shouldn't be bound by neutrality, should be bound by impartiality. Fine, but impartiality is not neutrality, not opening your mouth.
This is interesting because when you gave the first Dries van Acht lecture, and I liked it because you started with explaining the impartiality of your role as a UN Special Rapporteur. And I was just wondering, why do you have to still explain this?
Explain,
why?
Exactly. Well, it makes the two of us.
But why?
So, because impartiality, and it's important to restate it, impartiality is to look at the facts as they are. And I look at all facts. So it's not that they say, no, because you're not condemned. I've condemned what I had to be condemned. I look at the facts.
But based upon facts, as a UN Special Rapporteur, you do that impartial.
I look at the facts according to the law. And once the assessment is established, my responsibility is to report to state and engage with civil society and governments. And what's the point of not listening? Because the point is that in the last 15 months, Natasja, something really monstrous has happened, and it has happened under our eyes. And this is why the people, in whatever country you go, cannot make sense of it. They're desperate. They are like light struck. They don't know where to go.
Well, they don't know where to go also because people in power, they look away. I really like this bit also in your lecture. You spoke about these horrific cruelties that we're seeing unfolding before our own eyes, live, broadcasted on our social media. That's what you said in your lecture. A monstrosity being broadcasted in real time to all of us, you said. How do you explain the fact that people in power are still looking away?
Well, of course,
because that is what makes us desperate right now.
Yeah. I think that there are different. It's not a. Your question makes a lot of sense, but it's not easy to give a straightforward answer because different people in power respond to different interests, and they are financial, economic, political. I would say there are people who know and speak out as much as they can. And this is the case of a few European leaders. There is the case of, and this is the majority, who know very well that what's happening is completely outrageous. And at the same time, they're scared. They're scared and they want to preserve their own interests for a political career. They don't want to deal with a nightmare of having to upset the United States and Israel, and then the United States and the pro-Israel lobby, which I'm sorry, I had no idea, but no idea that it was so strong and influential. This is something that should alarm the Dutch citizens, because again, we are talking, why would people stop a discussion? I had a meeting at the parliament, Natasja. It's not that I didn't have it. I had it, and it was very civilized, and it was televised, so people should be given an opportunity to listen to what I say. Yeah. But there are also others who do not see the Palestinians as equal. So the pain, the suffering, the fact that you say, yeah, but 60,000 people have been killed by Israeli snipers and tanks, bombs, and 17,000 children and the victims since the very beginning, 70% of the victims. And we have been monitoring this from the very beginning, me, other special rapporteurs, other UN agencies, Amnesty International.
There are so many reports on this.
Absolutely. The death toll has always been, from the beginning, 70% of women and children. Do you know why? Because this is the demography of Gaza. And when we say the attack has been completely and intentionally indiscriminate, is because every Palestinian in Gaza became a target, a legitimate target. There was no interest to protect anyone. But the moment you say that, people have to take responsibility. And this is why I'm 100% convinced that there was no interest in meeting me.
So there are several factors. It's taking responsibility. It's capitalism, economic ties.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about capitalism, we also talk about colonization. These two things go hand in hand.
Yes, because one wouldn't exist without the other. In the sense that, it's interesting because I recently discovered that Karl Marx toward the last, I'm not particular, I went to a conference, there was this very famous Japanese scholar who has studied the last phase of Marx's life. So after studying the capital and impact of capital on human relations and the individual, he studied impact of capital on the environment and in the context of colonialism. And it's interesting that this is the part that we know the least, how capitalism has impacted natural resources and capitalism. And colonialism. And colonialism is the exploitation of others for our own profit.
And that's where I want to go with you, because you wrote a very interesting report, your recent report from October last year, Colonial Erasure, that's the title of the report. And in this report, you claim that the violence that Israel has unleashed against the Palestinian post-7 October is not happening in a vacuum. Can you explain this?
Yeah, because look, just if we leave aside the fact that Israel was created inside Palestine in 1948, since 1967, in the little of historical Palestine that remained, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Israel has maintained an occupation that has been the vehicle for the military to take land from the Palestinians, to push them out, to create settlements. And then, of course, this created resistance. Resistance was named a security threat, and then terrorism, and then crashed. And so 1 million Palestinians arrested and detained, including children. 700 children per year would be arrested by soldiers based on military orders because there is no civil rule. So military orders written by soldiers, enforced by soldiers, reviewed in military court by soldiers. So this is when I say this occupation, the Israeli occupation in the Gaza, West Bank and East Jerusalem has been a military dictatorship. And people say, yeah, but as of 2005, Gaza, the Israel left Gaza. No, took out the settlements, but the occupation remained. So the settlements are a condition to have settler colonialism.
Right.
Not the occupation. The occupation remained. Gaza has remained totally under control from outside by Israel. Of course, there was Hamas, very convenient. So you can create, as Netanyahu and Smotrich recently said, Hamas is our asset. The Palestinian Authority is a liability, because with the Palestinian Authority, you could still have the pretense that you could negotiate for a two-state solution, while Hamas would give the perfect excuse not to talk about the two-state solution.
So help me put this in a broader perspective. What parallels do you see with this situation and past colonialism?
Look, there is no one case that looks really alike Palestine. But first of all, the land is critical, and people need to understand that. There are not two states, there are not two people alike fighting against each other. Israel is claiming sovereignty over the little that remained to the Palestinians, and there is international consensus as of the 90s that the West Bank, the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem constitute the territorial unity where the Palestinians can exercise exclusive self-determination in the forms of statehood. And this is what states have continued to recite as a mantra. Meanwhile, during the negotiation process, during the Oslo Accords, Israel has continued to expand the military presence in the occupied territories and even create more settlements. This is not uncommon to other realities. Think of the US. In the US, we refer to the US as the new continent. It's not the new continent, because that continent was inhabited by hundreds and hundreds of indigenous people.
Well, we as the Netherlands also have our own history of
colonialism.
And
Absolutely. It started
my ancestors are from a place which has been colonized. Many Dutch people.
Which place?
The Dutch Antilles, former Dutch Antilles.
Okay.
Suriname, for example.
I've lived in Indonesia for 6 years.
Well, so you understand.
Totally.
This is our history. So that's why I wanted to put it in a broader...
But there is one thing that people don't understand, and I don't think I've said it in another interview. People, because this is the excuse that has been used. The Oslo Accords have been used as an excuse to say, well, now there is a state building, nation building. You know how many treaties, for example, have been signed in the United States with the Native Americans and then violated? This is the thing. When you have the monopoly of the force, you do whatever you want. And this is why today we are in another era, because now we have international law, we have human rights, and we have the responsibility of all states to protect the right of self-determination, which is the right of to exist as a people, which is being violated.
We have all this based also on our own history. And the Netherlands, there were many moments where even the king of the Netherlands made apologies for the colonial past of the Netherlands, these slavery. These kind of things make you think that we have come to a consensus where we understand what colonialism is, that we understand what the consequences are and the horrific consequences.
No, I don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think so at all. And I'm convinced. And again, I often say during lectures that for me, Palestine has been the red pill in Matrix. So people cannot understand what I'm saying when I'm saying if they have not seen Matrix. In the sense, it's been such a revelation. Because, I don't know, have you studied? How do you know about colonialism? Because people who have experienced colonialism know what it is. But I don't come from a colonized country. I'm a European who has learned was learned what colonialism was when she was 28. When I was 28, I started questioning international law, which is not just an instrument, a neutral instrument. It's presented so aseptically in our textbooks, in Western universities in general. So international law is an instrument to regulate relations among states. No, international law has been used first as such an instrument to depredate countries, to subjugate countries, to steal resources and land, to trade human beings as slaves. It has changed over time, though. It has become more human, and human rights are a critical part of it. But still, we shouldn't forget, as Omar Barghouti says, and I heard him saying that 1 year ago in the Netherlands, and then I've continued to use this because it was shocking for me as well, because I'm a European, and 500 years of our history as Europeans have been colonial, and this has shaped our DNA as Western societies.
Has it also shaped our mindset?
Of course, because we don't see the other as equal. You know, there is an Israeli historian, very interesting, a genocide scholar, Rassiel, who was saying, you know, we were talking about that at the end of a lecture, and he was saying, you know, the idea of a superior race has not ended with Hitler. Hitler died, and the idea was not killed with him. And the thing is that I would add to this, it didn't even come from him. The idea of the white race as superior, I know it's very heavy what I'm saying, but we need to own it. We need to look at our past in the face, because I don't want to carry this legacy into the future. I don't want my children to live into a world that still has that legacy. I want us to look into each other's eyes as equal, and countries and states to do the same. It's the time to, and this can be an opportunity in this darkest time, to look at each other like nation to nation. But
then we have to be honest. So what is the brutal honesty you wanted to share about this?
It's not over. Because you see, and this is where we close the circle. I think that there are people who do not, in this country, who do not see the Palestinians as human. Because as we speak, there are politicians in this country who think that Israel has done the right thing and is doing the right thing because it's somewhat defending Western values. These are not Western values. I don't want this to be Western values. Western values should be different and should be, a combination of who we are and who we don't want to be anymore. So, Natasja, this can be a transformative moment. I know it looks very dark, and we are psychologically overwhelmed by these 2 weeks or 3, President Trump in power, but we need to keep cool and think strategically about who we are, who we want to be, and how we want to protect ourselves and our societies.
You mentioned Trump. Yeah, I know we still have, but I was of course, like everybody else, watching this press conference, and he talking about the bizarre idea of America taking over Gaza. And immediately I thought, like, this is colonialism again. We're there again. Still.
But for the Palestinians, is colonialism still on steroids.
Exactly. So, with the idea of saying, well, we're going to make things better. And this is what we heard several times, also in the past, that former colonial power said, well, we're civilizing indigenous people.
Yeah, but it's not over because we have not dealt with it. And this is the moment we need to deal with it. Have you ever heard so many people, and especially young people, talking about colonialism and settler colonialism? I've never heard so much. Maybe it's also the world we are part of and the communities we are part of, but I see young people in Western countries getting more and more aware of that past that has been concealed from us somewhat. And so, again, what President Trump is proposing is so abysmally unlawful that cannot happen. lest we want to bring to an end the system that we have been part of, and which has not served everyone equally. But we in the West, we have benefited from it. We have benefited from the peace and prosperity that it has brought. It will come to an end. And we will miss human rights when we don't have them anymore.
Well, while we're talking about human rights, I'm also thinking about human rights movements, but also the way we unite, the way we protest. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I see that declining a little bit when it comes to Gaza.
Because people are tired. Because people don't see what's happening in the bigger scheme of things. And when I talk to young people in universities, I understand that they don't know where this story comes from. And they don't know how transformative this moment is. They don't appreciate how incredible is that the ICC has issued 2 arrest warrants for 2 Israeli leaders. But this is huge, and it's a sign that the system, that international justice is moving. And also, look, we have 2 cases for genocide, one initiated by South Africa against Israel, but one initiated by Nicaragua against Germany, which just might be found complicit in another genocide. Because the point is that, Germany and the United States account for most of the arms transfer to Israel. And without that, this genocide would have not been possible.
Yeah, I want to deliberate a little bit more about that, about complicity, because the Netherlands, and you know where I may be going when we are talking about arms, the Netherlands has provided key components, of course, for F-35 fighters. They're used by Israel in Gaza. The Dutch government is saying, well, we do not export directly these arms, but we all know that they are very important for Israel. So does this make the Netherlands complicit?
Well, look, there is a case ongoing in the Netherlands. And I respect the role of the Dutch courts. So let me just say what are the international obligations out there.
Right.
It's very clear. The International Court of Justice, in the context of what it has recognized as a plausible genocide, has reminded member states of their obligation not to transfer weapons, directly, indirectly, in total or in part, including dual-use items, to a state like Israel, which might be committing not just genocide, but violations of international humanitarian law, including war crimes. Look at Gaza. So it's pretty obvious that the facts are incredibly dangerous, and I don't know what your government has been looking at.
So how credible is my government or our government here, and even the Netherlands when it comes to we say, well, we're a defender of human rights. We have the ICC here, we have the ICJ here. How credible are we when we're at the same time doing these things?
Not much. Not much. Sorry, honesty. We speak about honesty, let's be honest, not much. But this is why European countries, there are only a few who have maintained integrity, and integrity that allows them to be honest interlocutors of other countries in the global south. And this is why I'm saying either we really get into a sort of, really discover some humility, or it's after what happened in Gaza for the past 15 months, it's going to be very difficult to use what was our suasion power vis-a-vis other member states in whatever we want to call it, developing countries, and I don't like the term, or global south. We have been lecturing people in the global south for decades about the need to respect human rights, the need to not to kill each other, the need to respect rules. And then, in the face of this, we get into this pick and choose attitude, this a la carte menu, this considering a la carte menu international law obligations. No, international law thrives in its universality. It's been written to apply to the strong and the weak, the rich and the poor. And the moment we start creating zones of exceptions, we have already undermined international law.
So circling back to colonization, how seriously should I take these apologies for past colonial actions of the Netherlands and at the same time participating in exporting, for example, weapons, arms, to a power that is colonizing right now Palestinian territories?
But they would tell you, it's not colonization. It's not colonization. They are defending themselves. And this is why the self-defense mantra has been so overwhelming. Because Israel, as again Rassigal says, Israel has operated as a state of exception compared to international law, has always been excused, has been allowed to become what I described in my last report to the General Assembly, a serial violator of international law. But not because there are no other countries who not violate international law. Let's be honest. But find another country who has been politically, economically, financially shielded by from all form of responsibility. At least there are countries who commit violations and then face reprimand and sanctions. Israel this year has attacked the United Nations like no other countries. It has killed over 270 staff members. It has destroyed 70% of the UN premises, including shelling them where they were sheltering IDPs. I've seen myself in hospitals, kids who have been torn into pieces, without limbs, with their belly open after being shelled, and they were saying, when we were in a UN school, and they've attacked the UN, they've attacked the US peacekeepers, they've declared the Secretary General persona non grata, myself, but you know, it's the assault on the United Nations and the ICC.
So what you're describing, the UN failing to dismantle this colonization of Israel, of the Palestinian territories, and at the same time, I'm thinking, well, this exposes the limits of international law then.
I would say to be easily understood by people who really reject the colonialism framework as if it was something coming from Mars or an ideological term. I would say Israel has violated almost systematically all, apart from a few, all resolutions of the Security Council, including the Security Council calling for a ceasefire and the Security Council asking Israel not to expand the settlements in 2016. Israel has violated all resolutions of the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, decisions and advisory opinions and provisional measures of the International Court of Justice. Israel has the Prime Minister and the former Minister of Defense wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. What else is missing in the assessment of Dutch politicians before they take action?
But what do you think it is?
Hypocrisy. Honestly, I mean, hypocrisy. The problem is that with hypocrisy comes also a lot of responsibility. There is lack of compliance with international law. And I've met with so many in these past 4 or 5 days, with parliamentarians, with many people in the civil society, with hundreds and hundreds of students, with scholars, and they're civil servants. They are desperate because, including, I've met with people from different groups of faith, including Jewish people and Israelis who are here, and they say, it's not just international law being seen as something remote. For us, it's a constitutional responsibility how do we enforce it? Say, look, and this goes to the second part of your question. Does this show the limit of international law? To a certain extent, yes. But international law is a set of rules. And then there are mechanisms. So the rules are there. And I think are as good as they need to be to prevent all this. Then
so
there
it's the mechanism.
Yes, it's political will, because international law is as strong as the will of member states to enforce it. Right. If they don't enforce it, shall we be hopeless? No. And this is where we need to be as active as we can, because this is when the power comes back to us as citizens from all parts of life. We need to activate all the mechanisms that are there to make people who have contributed, enabled, profited from the unlawful endeavor that Israel has put in place in the occupied Palestinian territory accountable.
How do we do that?
Well, it seems that Dutch organizations know that very well. I mean, there are organizations in this country and in Denmark and in the UK who are suing the government. This is another revolutionary thing, and this is why I think I understand that people feel hopeless, because they tend to look at how, first of all, they are depressed and enraged and sad, sickened to see people dying, children turned into smithereens. But at the same time, they need to see the developments, accountability. People who have enabled the system need to be brought to court.
Right. So, civil action. At the same time, people read newspapers. They watch television. What role does media have in all this?
I look for the day when there will be an investigation on the role of Western corporate media in this genocide. Because this is not, Natasja, this is not a genocide that has been just overlooked. This is a genocide that has been justified and enabled. Because
also by media?
Absolutely.
In what way?
Because they have maintained a line sticking to the Israeli military narrative, using that terminology, amplifying sometimes the fabrications, like there is a Hamas headquarters under Al-Shifa hospital, justifying the destruction of the entire hospital. They have repeated incessantly the mantra of the human shields, of the terrorists. All the Palestinians have been portrayed somewhat as terrorists or terrorist accomplices. You know, it's the subliminal effect of normalizing a situation which is pathetically unlawful by inserting into the language words that create that sort of mental dogma that the Palestinians, for some reason, have brought this havoc upon themselves, for some reason.
Is that intentional, do you think, by media?
I think so.
What benefit would media have?
Oh, there is a lot of pressure on the media. There is pressure. There are investigations ongoing. They say that there are clearly pro-Israel pressure groups acting as censors and prompting self-censorship into the system. I mean, and there are journalists who have been fired for using words that the editorial bureau didn't want to. No, you cannot talk about genocide. You cannot even plausible genocide, up to the point that there has been no coverage in certain countries of the ICJ provisional measures. And again, this is why I think that there should be a Europe-wide investigation. And you know why? Because in the past, in Rwanda and in former Yugoslavia, in the case of the various criminal tribunals that have taken place, the media were found responsible for having creating or contributed to an enabling environment that prepared the people to become violent to the point of being genocidal.
As a journalist, I find this difficult to hear, and at the same time, I recognize these signals as well. I mean, I used to be a host for a talk show and interviewed one politician about what was happening in Israel. This was post or before 7 October. And I was talking about apartheid.
No one can talk about apartheid in TV.
Not in combination with Israel.
Of course. Of course. Because there is one and one only apartheid, it's South Africa. People don't understand that South Africa has given us the term of a reality that is institutionalized racial domination that existed also in other countries. This is settler colonialism.
But Francesca, when I said that word on national television, the next day, hell broke loose. Like 800 complaints about me saying that word on national television in combination with Israel, which made me an anti-Semite.
But you see how paradoxical it is? You see how much we downplay and we banalize, we trivialize real anti-Semitism, which exists. And this is something that pierces my heart, because this is the continent where we have genocided the Jewish people. It's us, it's our ancestors, it's our responsibility, and it's revolting that we still have anti-Semitism. But let's be clear, anti-Semitism is discrimination and racism against the Jews as Jews, because they are Jews. So it's discrimination against the Jewish people or Jewish persons because they are Jewish people. Same as anti-Arabism and Islamophobia is discrimination against these people as Arab or as Muslim. While today, the anti-Semitism, the accusation of anti-Semitism that has been leveled against you has nothing to do with you. You have undermined the credibility of the State of Israel. And since when? Criticizing a state leads to accusation of, discrimination.
Yeah, but I also was confronted with a company which had to respond. The company I was working for, the broadcasting company, which had to respond to all this backlash. And I found myself in a vacuum where this broadcasting company said, yeah, but we also have to explain this. There was an uncomfortable...
Because they don't know. They don't have the words.
So exactly, that's what I mean. Because you're talking about intentional idea coming from media to put this in a frame in which we are saying, okay, we thought about this. But a lot of times also these broadcasting companies, these agencies, maybe have a lack of knowledge.
Look, this is what I thought before. I now think that it's willful ignorance, self-censorship, and sometimes really people who are there also because they need to act as censors. And I've received various testimonies from people who have been working in international, in the international media industry, and they were told that, including Palestinians, and there is a case in Germany that has just concluded. It was, again, I don't want to comment on the case, but where the journalist of Palestinian ancestry had been severely mistreated. And this is absolutely not an exception. In fact, it's not just the Palestinians, it's others. The question is, you see the manipulation is not that we are, what you have done has been accused of anti-Semitism, again, because you have said anything that has been discriminatory against the Jewish people. I'm saying, look at the Jerusalem Declaration of Anti-Semitism, which has been drafted by over 350 Jewish scholars who oppose this conflation between Judaism and the State of Israel and say the State of Israel doesn't represent the Jews. There is such a diversity, they say, in Judaism. And okay, there are Jewish people who recognize themselves in the State of Israel and others who don't. But let's keep anti-Semitism for what anti-Semitism really is. The point is that now they throw the allegations of anti-Semitism at everyone like confetti.
Last question. When can we expect your new report?
By June this year. And I can't wait.
You're smiling.
Yes.
What is it going to be about?
It's going to be about what I call the matrix, the private sector. The military the military sectors and companies and the surveillance sector, because Israel really operates as a military state, and it has used Palestine and the Palestinians, as Anthony Lowenstein describes in his phenomenal book, Palestine Laboratory. They've been used as a workshop where to test weapons and other techniques, including mass confinement techniques. It's horrible. And again, because this is something that Israel sells all over, systems to repress and to spy. This is something that it's endangering all of us, but also they are the more innocuous corporations, businesses, pension funds, charities. There are charities and individuals selling Palestinian properties from Western capitals. This is unacceptable. This is to be brought to an end. There should be an imperative. It's a legal obligation, but also an ethical imperative not to sell to the occupation, not to buy from the occupation, as some have said. And this is why I want to, again, give an opportunity for a better way to live all together. And this is why I say, let it be justice.
Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you, Natasja.